Commander players don't know how easy they have it these days. Back when the format wasn't designed for, not only did we have less cards to work with, but also a lot less options when it came to answering our opponent's disruption. It felt like colors actually had restrictions, and no, this isn't going to be a hybrid mana discussion. Lord knows so many creators have done that topic to death at this point. More so, I wanted to touch on the topic of how players are now able to better circumvent traditional forms of disruption that we've now normalized. Ways to attack great hands, insane boards, and just get around interaction altogether. We've seen an increase in some of these effects, and I don't think a lot of players are aware that they actually exist because they may not be thinking outside of the box. So this thread was a real inspiration for this, and we're going to be going over 3 specific anti-disruption categories that I think Wizards has been low-key, intentionally or unintentionally building up towards, and I think could be the next toolbox piece for you going into your next Commander game. So firstly, this post says, having a rule against mass land destruction doesn't make sense in a world where more and more cards are being printed to weaponize lands. With earthbending coming to a pod near you, how do we feel about reevaluating land destruction? There are honestly a large number of decks using this rule in bad faith, but I only see it getting worse. If there was a rule that said no mass artifact removal, every deck would go crazy with busted artifacts. There's a reason that land destruction exists and is exactly as it is. Now, a couple things before we get into this. You don't really want to be touching lands because it is a differentiating factor of Magic the Gathering from everything else. So it is seen as a baseline pillar, which is why no one wants to touch it, right? No other game necessarily has a mana system similar to this or at such a deep level. So for example, maybe something like the One Piece TCG has Dawn, but you can only go up to 10, you draw 2 a turn, but you can't necessarily interact with that Dawn on a wide level. There are cards that maybe take a Dawn and put it back into the Dawn deck or tap it down and stuff like that, but they're not necessarily a piece that you can animate and attack with. And even in something like Lorcana, where you don't have mana in the traditional sense in your deck, but you can turn your cards into resources of that sense, maybe take a high costed card early, turn it in, and then once you draw another copy of it later, you can cast it. You also have that, but then you permanently lose the card. Whereas in Magic the Gathering, you not only have fetch lands, you have basic lands, non-basic lands that are multiple types. You have cards that can become lands. You have lands that can become creatures that can turn into other cards, whatever it is. You have such a variety in the mana base that it just feels like this is like the holy grail of what is untouchable in Magic. But really what OP here is failing to understand is that this doesn't necessarily make land destruction more viable against the Earthbend decks. If you read Earthbend, the top comment kind of highlights it really well. You know, Earthbending makes it so mass land destruction is more one-sided. And I think this is a really interesting concept because it helps to understand how Wizards has been designing certain effects and making trade-offs that honestly don't even feel like downsides. It feels like earthbending is a positive thing, which is why certain cards were even talked about having seen or might see eternal Magic play in Legacy and everything for earthbending, you know, wastelands and stuff like that. And that's what we're going to get into. The first category is I want to talk about land destruction in general and how Wizards of the Coast is helping to circumvent mass land destruction and or singular land destruction. Now, mass land destruction, they've already done that through the bracket system, but singular land destruction is so powerful because a lot of cards out there generate a lot of value being a land. A lot of people get away with this, which is what OP was alluding to, playing a powerful rare or mythic land that may have like a passive ability. Think of something like a Maze of It that is able to undo an attack here and there, or a Glacial Chasm that's able to turn combat damage to 0. All these lands that are protected by this unwritten rule, or in some cases written rule in the bracket system, of not touching lands. And this becomes even worse in something like Beifong's Bounty Hunter that says whenever a non-land creature you control dies, earthbend X, where X is that creature's power. Now, if you have a board full of tokens and token generators and a sack engine, you can sack a bunch of creatures individually, kind of create a bunch of creatures out of your lands, and then you are now creating a whole other level of things that you can then sack into. Now, this says whenever a non-land creature you control dies, so you're not going to be able to earthbend into lands and then, you know, kind of sacrifice them for continuous value and go infinite that way. But what's nice here is you're able to create a level of protection if they go away. So we've seen, for example, that with earthbend specifically, when it dies or is exiled, return it to the battlefield tapped. So against something like an Armageddon, if you earthbend a bunch of your lands, even if you Armageddon, your lands are going to come back and then your opponents aren't. That's going to be the basic level of understanding of this. The level 2 of this is putting this on something like a Wasteland where you're able to destroy your opponent's land, but then your Wasteland comes back tapped. So you're not even down a mana. Or something like a Fetch Land where you fetch for a card and you technically rammed at this point if you were able to Earthbend that land. And this is where Earthbend starts to see a potential rise in spike of power level when it comes to 60 card formats at least. But again, OP is a little bit misled in their understanding of how this interacts with mass land destruction. It makes it even better for the person casting the Armageddon in that case. So with that misunderstanding, I think we can really then further lead into the idea of playing single target land destruction. It's going to be even harder to destroy lands now, Earthbend becoming more prevalent in the Magic sphere. I think Avatar is going to be a relatively popular set, and Earthbend is definitely going to be one of the more powerful mechanics that come out of it outside of something like Firebending. So it's going to be more important to be running single target land destruction. Cleansing Wildfire is one of my favorite ones, Pauper staple in the mid-range strategies, just to be able to ramp and you destroy your own indestructible lands just to leave it alone, draw a card and ramp up. But Cleansing Wildfire is nice because it grabs basics. In a Pauper metagame where you have things like a Utopia Sprawl going on to basic lands, you can Cleansing Wildfire that land and really set them back huge on tempo. Yes, they search for a basic, but then you can then draw a card to replace this and then potentially disrupt like a rare land. So again, yes, more Earthbend means lands are more protected, but this should probably lean people more into playing Cleansing Wildfire effects so that players can't get the opportunity to cast Earthbend spells or Earthbend their lands in response to something like that, especially out of the Avatar set. We're going to be getting powerful lands like this one, Agna Kila, that says this land enters tapped unless you control a basic island, but then its activated ability underneath the mana ability says pay 3, tap, draw, then discard a card. So a continuous filter engine, a discard outlet potentially to enable some madness shenanigans, anything that might trigger discards in general whenever you discard or cycle a card, and then like draw effects, continuous effects that you get out of your land. So Avatar has a lot of powerful lands that you want to be able to Earthbend and quote unquote protect, even if it's small time value with something like this. Lands have been a powerful thing for a very long time. We should be playing more single target removal, but Wizards of the Coast has been giving us ways to circumvent this. We have commanders already out there. I would imagine Green and Simic being the more popular ones that can animate lands that do so and maybe give, you know, overwhelming effects, you know, +2/+2, trample, vigilance, whatever, right? Like we have effects that animate our lands and make them powerful. We don't have anything like Earthbend necessarily where we animate a land and then it immediately gains some level of protection. This is a step up from that, and this is Wizards of the Coast giving you a little bit of more control in your hand, but maybe tilting the scales a little too far to one end when it comes to anti-mass land destruction or single target land destruction. The next thing I want to talk about is circumventing counterspells. Now, Wizards of the Coast has been doing this for a while, where we are not only printing cards that are uncounterable, but then printing counterspells that just return a spell to their owner's hand. Think of something like Aether Gust or Unsubstantiate. Now, these cards exist. They are powerful blue cards. I would highly recommend you play them, but ultimately there are ways to interact. It's almost like you don't even want to cast a spell in general. If you can cheat it out, sneak attack, whatever it is, if you can just put it onto the battlefield, that is a great way to do so. And I think especially last year, we got a big induction of this when you're thinking of something like Manifest. So Reality Shift has been around for a while, a very popular blue removal spell, and something honestly that comes out of nowhere, a exile effect on blue that is then able to manifest the top card of someone's library. Now, what's great about something like this is that Reality Shift, you can manifest your own creature. So for example, if you have a token that you're maybe not taking advantage of, or it's just going to get no value if your opponent removes it in their own way, or your opponent's getting too much value out of it, then maybe you can Reality Shift your own creature and then manifest the top card of your library. The way this is fantastic, as many of you know, you can manifest at any point. So you can manifest the top card of your library and then have it be a 2/2 creature. You can then go to blocks, block with that. And then because of a special action, you can pay the converted mana cost of the card on the front side if it is a creature to flip it back up. Now that flip is not is not an action that your opponent can react to. It's like tapping a land for mana. It is a special action. It just continues to exist. So this is a way for you to potentially brain surge, brainstorm, set up a creature on top, and then manifest the top card of your deck. And then if you have some amount of mana, flip something up as a surprise, or just have your opponents thinking, because this is face down, they don't have the ability to look at it. You can just look at it like a face down trap card in a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And flip it up at any time, or just leave it face down because it's a land, it's an instant, whatever it is. And this is a way to get a creature onto the battlefield that circumvents some type of counterspell. Now, of course, you have to cast Reality Shift, and that might get countered, but once a creature is out, this is a way for you to cheat out a creature that might have to have been cast. Your Cavern of Souls potentially did not name the creature type of what you have flipped over, and so now you're able to get it out. And last year we got a big influx of creatures with Manifest Dread. So this is looking at the top 2 cards of your library, putting one on the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature and the other into your graveyard. And what's great about this is, of course, you are able to feed your graveyard and maybe give yourself some more reanimation targets. But this one's kind of nice because it happens on your opponent's upkeep. So your opponent, if they're unable to get rid of Abhorrent Oculus, they're not going to be able to get rid of these tokens until it's their turn. They're going to be using those resources on their turn. But the Manifest Dread mechanic in general, the Manifest mechanic in general, is a great way to get creatures out from underneath counter magic. Now, it may not be the most traditional thing in the world. It may not be cheating at a lower cost, but it is in many ways a quote unquote budget way, maybe not specifically with Abhorrent Oculus being a relatively expensive card, seeing play amply in 60 card formats. But manifesting and manifest dreading is a really cool way to get around counterspell strategies, especially opponents that may not have like clear win conditions. All they like to do is counter your opponent's decks or your stuff in general. Then you're going to be able to build a deck that manifests a lot. And if they don't counter all your manifest stuff, eventually, if you set yourself up right, you're going to be able to manifest a bunch of things onto the board, and then they're not able to remove those. And then maybe in response to something that they're going to do, you can manifest or flip something, get some type of effect, whatever it is. You can get all these abilities. So Wizards of the Coast is giving us an angle, a really cool, interesting, slow way to get around counterspells when it comes to Commander. Finally, I want to go around hand disruption spells. And Wizards of the Coast has been giving us really cool ways to do this, especially when it comes to the Avatar set. Now, it's not necessarily about Thoughtseize or discard specifically. Single target hand removal is not the most popular thing in Commander. It's just not a lot of value. Hitting one person isn't as powerful as being able to hit multiples. And so this can also be counted for something like Wheels. We've come into situations where our opponent's drawn a bunch of cards and their eyes widen, or they make a comment like, wow, this hand is insane, or like, wow, that's kind of cool. And then you're thinking, okay, they probably have something powerful in their hand. And a really cool way to disrupt that is to wheel everybody. Like, all right, I'm just going to wheel. I have nothing in my hand. And they're like, no, I love my hand, right? Like this is a common scenario that many of us Commander players have gone through. So to be able to get around this, to be able to put cards away, Wizards of the Coast has been giving us abilities like Foretell, sorry. And this has been happening for a couple years now. Kaldheim specifically gave us cards like Behold the Multiverse, which is a more popular one. There are other Foretell cards that have seen play, but Behold the Multiverse definitely keeps coming back here and there. Scry 2, then draw 2 cards. You can do that at instant speed for 4, or you can foretell it away for 2, and then your opponent's thinking, what type of card is this being cast from exile? Now, there's a lot more synergies out there now of cards that benefit you from casting from exile and pay you off for casting other cards from exile. So this is an archetype that has been seeing more and more support over time. Behold the Multiverse is able to put a card away face down, so your opponent doesn't see it, but the restriction is you have to cast it later. So now this card can't be Thoughtseized, it can't be wheeled, it can't be interacted with in that sense. And if your opponent blind names it with something like a tax effect saying like, oh, this card costs X amount more to cast, like, sure, they got you. Maybe they have experience playing against your deck and they know what you're doing. That's fine. But when it comes to a blank table, you're going out into, as Maltown says, I'm thinking in a recent podcast when I'm forgetting the group, but regardless, with Veggie Wagon and stuff like that, he was talking about Gen Pop. When you're going into the Gen Pop of the world, something like this can be really powerful because you can then just cast it for a reduced cost later down the line, or hopefully a reduced cost when it comes to Foretell. And you're paying with something like Behold the Multiverse, you're paying that cost over time. The next effect that we see more of these days, prowess players and modern prowess players and just aggro aficionados in general, you have played with or against Slick Shot Show Off. Very popular prowess threat at this point, and it's not necessarily that it has prowess. It's like some type of like mega hybrid prowess where you don't get the +1 on defense, but you get the +2 in power. You can plot this away, and we have a lot of popular plot cards. There are plot cards in Pauper, there are plot cards in Modern, in Standard, whatever it is. You can pay a reduced cost and then exile it from your hand and then cast it as a sorcery for free later down the line. You're still casting this, you're not getting around any exile effects or anything like that. And technically, this does get hit by something like Vexing Bubble. So there are ways, of course, in all of these scenarios where things become worse, right? But this is a way for, again, to put cards away so that they don't get interacted by discard, they don't get hit with wheel effects, and then you are able to cast later down the line when you are later ready for it. And finally, we see that kind of even further exasperated in something like Appa Steadfast Guardian and airbending in general. When Appa enters, airbend any number of target non-land permanents you control. Whenever you cast a card from exile, create a 1/1 white ally creature token. So you exile them as you airbend them. While each one is exiled, its owner may cast it for 2 generic mana rather than its mana cost. So again, this is another way to get crazy effects that you already have on the board that you want to recast. So cards that you maybe spend a lot of mana on or whatever it is, you can airbend them away, put them in a zone where they are generally unable to interact with. There are cards like, again, processors and stuff like that, Eldrazi processors, that are able to take cards out of exile. But if your opponent is metagaming for you with processors, like, that's probably a win in general. I don't know what to tell you. But not only is it a way for you to recur that, but as I mentioned, it is a way for you to get around the discard effects, get around the wheel effects, and protect cards that you really like. And now as well, Appa Steadfast Guardian is a way for you to do that with your board. This is anti-board wipe protection. You are going to be able to kind of put away any number of non-land permanents you control, your mana rocks and everything. And if you have the right mana rocks, you can recast them in a way where you generate a bunch of mana anyway. So you're able to protect that, and now they are board wipe free, but also interaction free. So if you were to bounce something back to your hand, your opponent could potentially still get you to wheel or discard your hand, but now that doesn't happen. So Wizards of the Coast, all in all, has been giving players and Commander players in general so many ways to circumvent traditional forms of interaction, whether that they be in a slow way or in a relatively sneaky fast way. Manifest Dread, Earthbend against land destruction, Manifest and Manifest Dread specifically against Counterspells to be able to get creatures up if you set it up right. Again, a relatively slow way, but still a method. And then finally, with effects like Plot, Foretell, and now even Airbend, to be able to put cards in zones that are relatively hard to interact with when it comes to, again, the hand disruption, the wheel effects, or whatever it is. It is making it way harder for you to interact with your opponent as well as your opponents to interact with you. And so Wizards is giving you ways for you to go about your plans, protect your plans, and make sure that you succeed in doing the thing or going about the win condition that you want with your Commander deck. So all in all, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. How are you feeling about these things that Wizards of the Coast has been doing over time? Were you aware of them? Did you already know, but like maybe didn't categorize it in this way? This video serves no other purpose other than to make you aware of it. I thought it was a cool topic, one that I've been experimenting with in my own decks in many ways, trying to find different ways to get things uncounterable or protect against certain types of land destruction. And I think some of this is really interesting. So overall, I'm hoping that maybe the comments that you made in the beginning of the video with your super niche interesting stack maybe outlines similar play patterns or similar design goals that Wizards of the Coast have had. Maybe that niche card that you have is actually this really cool, interesting piece that maybe came out in recent years that is able to kind of circumvent a traditional pillar of interaction when it comes to Commander, and it helps make players think outside the box when it comes to combating it, but also playing with it. Overall, I'm hoping that maybe our Commander games become a little bit more interactive after watching a video like this.